There is one thing I'm in desperate need of this morning. Oh, my coffee. First sip.
Let me get that sip in. Okay.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? This is Kathy Perry.
We can. I can.
Oh, good. How are you?
Just fine.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We're going to start in just another minute to give people a chance. And then we're going to make sure everybody's muted so that we don't get cross noise for Carol as she's introducing.
Okay, no worries.
Kathy, do you have the ability for video?
I do. I used to always keep a little tag over it, so for privacy.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to. Not everybody's ready for prime time at this time in the morning.
Oh, let me see if you see me. If I take this off, can you see me now?
No, I just see your name.
Oh, okay. So
but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
There's 4 or 5 brave people on.
Okay.
One of these Tuesday mornings, I'm going to come on here just the way I get up in the morning, combing my hair, and be brave enough to be myself.
Kathy, if you click the video button down by the mic at the bottom, you should be able to get on.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
There you are, Kathy.
Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Carol, it's 9 o'clock. Or, it's 8 o'clock. Time for us to start.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to TNT. I'm Carol Ray of Notary to Pro, and I'm going to introduce Laura Biewer, at your service notary. And between the two of us, we're going to muddle through this morning and try to give you some helpful information. So I think what we talked very briefly this morning. We haven't talked at all. We were going to start with just a few things. I'm going to kind of head it off with just something that I think is really important to talk about. I'm finding that more and more people are letting me know, telling me, because this is an issue with notaries today, that there's so many people that are not only not issuing oaths and affirmations at the beginning of their signings when it's necessary. Somebody wrote yesterday, Annette wrote, and she said that she was at a Secretary of State's office, a meeting, and at the table, half of the notaries around the table did not even have a clue that they should be issuing an oath and affirmation. Wow. And I've heard this so many times. I've had people go out with other notaries that have been doing this for years. I've had students who have been doing it for years, and then I find out this is something that's very important, and I did want to cover this. Laura is a real expert at a lot of the problems that people run into because she does the hotline for the NNA, and she's very in tune to the law. So she's going to be taking the lead on a lot of these the situations that we face, but I wanted to cover this one. So if you're not aware of it, what you need to do when you go into a signing or any situation where someone has to swear under oath, or if you've got a jurat that says sworn and subscribed before me, you start off by issuing an oath and affirmation. If you don't have one, I have a really good one a lawyer gave me years ago. It's good for oaths and affirmations. It's short. It's not difficult to remember. And I'd be happy to send it to you if you drop me an email, notarytopro@gmail. I'll be happy to send it to you. And it's real small so that when you print it, you can laminate it, put it in your journal, whatever. But basically, you just go through the process of having people raise their right hand, which is not absolutely necessary, but I always like the procedure. It makes it feel more official. And have them, say I do to the oath and the affirmation. I think it's a good idea every time that you do this to mark in your journal somewhere. Find a spot that's always going to be the same. It's consistency that's so important. And just put a little mark, a little O, or write the word oath or something in there to indicate every time that you issue the oath or affirmation. If you ever get called into court, let's say that a borrower commits fraud, and they've lied on something. Maybe the debts and resolution form, they did not indicate that they had just purchased a car, and now they're behind in their payments. The lender's taking them to court, and they're suing them for fraud. One of the first things that's going to happen is that the notary is going to be called in to find out if they did issue the oath or affirmation to these borrowers. Because if they did, borrowers are solely responsible for the commitment of the fraud. They obviously lied, and they did it under oath. If you didn't do it, there's a good chance you could be very involved in this lawsuit in a very uncomfortable way. So it's extremely important. Even if people say, really? Are you kidding? Raise my hand. Isn't that kind of silly? Because people react that way because they've been to so many signings where no one, not attorneys, not title officers, not escrow officers, not real estate people, nobody has ever asked them to take an oath or affirmation. So this is really, really important. This is something that's really near and dear to my heart. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. If, again, if you want a really nice little oath that's very simple, I'll be happy to send it to you. And I'm going to turn this over to Laura. She's got so many great things to talk about today.
All right, Carol, before I do, there were a couple questions that came up while you were talking. One, Judy says, I always write in the first document section I notarize, oath given prior to the signing of the document. So she gives one oath that covers all the documents in the sign.
Yes, and that's what you do. You do it one time, and then what you do is you remind people every time that you come to a document that required taking an oath or affirmation, I just want to remind you that you're still under oath. And you can let them know at the beginning, I'm going to do this once, but I will remind you when we come to documents that require you be put under oath.
Great. And Carol, there was another question that says, do I need a separate certificate that says oath only, or can I cross out subscribed if they took that oath? So I'm wondering if they're asking, when I give an oath, does it require another certificate?
No, it's a jurat covers it, sworn and subscribed.
Perfect. And I think there was one more. The journal, of course, you know, the journal's my BFF. The journal, yeah. This is Terry, has a place for the signers to initial once the oath is given to indicate that they took an oath. And even if it doesn't, in your additional information, what a great place to write the word oath or affirmation, depending on what you did, so that you have documentation to support what you did during that signing, because there's no way to remember when you start doing thousands of notarizations what you did for that specific one. So great. Thank you, Carol.
No, your journal is your memory. We've talked about this before. And the consistency, even if it is just a little O or a little oath written there, you can show that judge or whoever's looking that you're consistent. You do it every time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I'm really surprised how often, either when I'm teaching the new and renewing notaries to get their commission in California, and you know how strict we are, and we cross every T and dot every I, and yet I find that many of the renewing notaries either don't realize they actually have to give it because it says subscribed and sworn, and it sounds like it's already done, but it's not done until you actually administer it. Now, you don't have to make them raise their hand. That's a ritual. That is a great way to bring consciousness to the situation that, hey, what you're about to say to me is important, because if you're lying to me, you can go to prison. This isn't just a So I do find it very interesting that somehow that just gets blurred over and they don't realize how important that is. And of course, every state is different. But in our state, that could be up to a $750 fine from the Secretary of State if it comes out that you did not administer an oath when it was appropriate, meaning when you're handling subscribing witness, credible witness, jurat, right? All of those require an oath. So it's really important. And as Carol said, it puts the responsibility on the shoulders of your signers rather than you. So I'm really glad, Carol, that you chose to talk about that in particular. Okay, there are two other kinds of notarial related.
I'm sorry, Laura.
I'm sorry, did somebody?
This is Lori, and I just wanted clarification on the question that I asked in regards to crossing out subscribe. So if I just gave an oath only, sometimes they don't have to subscribe or say anything, but basically they're certifying or saying. So do I need a separate certificate, or can I just cross out subscribe and I just gave an oath to them?
If
Like
they're
on the jurat.
So there's a difference in an oath versus a jurat. And in an oath, all they're doing is saying, I promise to tell you the truth, whatever that happens to be. That could be an oath of office. That could be something for the clergy. That could be lots of different things where they're not required to certify their signature. They're just required to make a promise of a truthful statement. And so you'll typically see that as deposed and said, or duly sworn by me, or sworn before me. You won't see the word subscribed. So when you see that, that's an oath. And the wording that they had to say out loud to you becomes the certificate. And so you would have their wording, and then you would stamp and sign it. And now you have the certificate wording, and then you have your seal of office and your signature.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome, Lori.
Quick comment.
Somebody wanted to make a comment.
Yep, it's me.
Beth.
Yes. I think Carol taught this to me. When I first start the signing and I get their ID and everything logged into my journal, I tell them that in your loan signing package, there may be one or more affidavits. And I tell them an affidavit is a sworn statement. So rather than place you under oath every time we come to an affidavit, I'm going to give you that verbal oath now. I'll remind you, you're still under oath when we come to that affidavit. They raise their hand, we go through the ceremony. I also have them affirm that they are the persons whose ID they presented to me. So that kind of covers me on that end. When they sign on my journal, there's a place where I write the word oath and have them initial under it. So then from that point on, they know that they are still under oath. As we come to a jurat or an affidavit, I say, okay, this is a signature name affidavit. I'm reminding you now that you're still under oath. This says that you are also known as these names, et cetera, and then have them sign.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Just because I know there may be some California notaries on the call. So for California notaries, I want you to know that it is expected that you give an oath for every single document. So if there were 4 different affidavits, you're expected to stop, give that oath for that particular affidavit, and then move on, rather than doing it up front and then reminding them. But that's California. I'm not saying that's a requirement for any other state. But if you're in California, the Secretary of State has put out there that that's the expectation. All right, I want to talk about a couple of other things, and thank you very much for jumping in when you have a comment. And if you would please then remute yourself when you're done, so that we don't have any cross sound going on, so everybody can hear us speak. That would be really great. One of the things that comes up that I see often, it has to do with when people sign in capacity. And what I mean is they're signing as attorney in fact, or they're signing as the guardian or the parent, or they're signing in some type, the trustee, some type of capacity. And the signature line is a real big issue, first of all. And then whether or not they can have it in their certificate is another issue. And then whether or not they need to see the proof is the third issue. So there's several things going on there. And what I want to talk about is that the signature line the signer cannot just sign the principal's name and that's it. They have to sign in the capacity. So they would have the principal's name by the signer's name, the person in front of you, as whatever their status is. That might be trustee, that might be guardian, that might be attorney in fact. So all of that becomes the signature line. The other thing is that every state, of course, has different rules. And so I decided to check that out. And I have a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12. There are 13 states that allow for you to use proof of representative capacity in your certificates. What I want to say is, for everybody else, if your law doesn't specify that, then what your best practice would be is that you would ask them to acknowledge to you out loud that they have the capacity they're claiming, number one. And you would put that in your journal. And actually, you would want to do that every time you're doing it. But for instance, a lot of the states that specifically allow for it, they have special certificates. They'll have an alternate certificate. One is for an acknowledgement by individual, and the other one would be an acknowledgement in representative capacity. And that might be a corporate type capacity, like president or vice president, or it might be something like attorney in fact or trustee. So in your state, so I'll name the states real quickly. They're in alphabetical order. So if you hear your state, there is something provided for you. And that's Alabama, Arizona, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Montana, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wisconsin. So if you just heard your state, then that means that there are special requirements in your state, and they either have a special certificate or they might make you see the proof that they are that, and then you need to document that proof. If I didn't name your state, it doesn't mean you can't notarize for somebody in capacity. You can. It just means that it's not going to go in the certificate, and you're going to ask them. You're still going to ask them, hey, do you have the proof? Can I see that power of attorney or certification of trust, whatever it is you have? But if they don't have it, you're not required to have it. You can just ask them to admit to you that they have that power. So when it comes to a loan signing, how do I know if they have to sign in all of that capacity? Well, I can tell you that if they're signing as the attorney in fact, they're going to need to do that. There is the trustee, and sometimes they're not signing in capacity of the trustee. They're actually signing as an individual, even though their title is trustee. And so that information or direction, look to your title company, contracting company. They need to tell you, how do I need to have my signer sign this? Because if they needed to sign in capacity and they didn't, then the signature is not going to be valid, and they're going to make you do it again. So it's really important when you see these kinds of signings to make sure that you look to your confirmation and or email them to say, I see that this person's signing in this capacity. How's their signature line supposed to look? And the reason that that is so important to ask is that it's the unauthorized practice of law for us to make that decision. I'm telling you in theory how it would look, but I cannot tell a specific signer that's how they're supposed to sign their document. That is part of the document, and that is not the area that we're allowed to tell them how it should be. We can say, oh, your lender said this is how it needs to be signed. Or they sent me an example of this is how it's supposed to be signed. But it cannot be Laura Biewer, the notary, telling them this is how it's supposed to be signed. So do I have any question about either one, what is proof of capacity? Two, what should I do when I get that kind of document and they're signing in that way?
I have a question kind of pertaining to it, but it's based on the AKA. If you have a client that has to sign a document, Laura Biewer, AKA Laura Biewers, but they never found that, they never signed the second way, and it's just what was picked up by the credit report. do they still sign the full line as the AKA because that's what's under the line?
So again, two things I want to say is that when we're notarizing, if they have two different names and they want both names to be part of that notarization, we need proof of both names. Otherwise, you're only proving the one name and the other one is just a piece of information on the signature line. So when it comes to signing, which is different than what we do when we notarize, when the client is signing, if they've got their name as, Laura Biewer, AKA Laura Sullivan, that would have been my maiden name, and that's what was printed underneath the line, that's likely what they're going to sign. But remember, whose job is it to know? It's not my job to know. It is the signer's job to know, or it is the contracting company's job to know if they need to sign with all of that. Whether or not they sign with all of that, that's separate from what you put in your certificate. In California, we are not allowed to certify that anybody has any capacity whatsoever. So we would not include AKAs. We wouldn't include any of that stuff. It would just be the person who is in front of me, their name as an individual. But if you're in one of those states that I named, then you would be including all the other, their capacity, attorney in fact, whatever it is. AKA is not representing somebody else. It's just saying I happen to go by another name.
Right. And you know what? I've had that happen to me before where I had to sign paperwork and they're like, well, what's the other name? And I'm like, well, I don't have another one, but they're just going, they kind of like force you to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they can sign however they want. Don't worry about it. That's not your job. But
Okay.
they can't force you to put what they want in your certificate because that's not their job. That's your job.
So the long story short is however they sign, no matter if that AKA is under there, then that's what they do.
Then that's what they do. And that's up to them. That's not the notary's decision or job.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There was a question I saw about California. Since we're not allowed, then we don't have to see the proof. So if you're not one of those 13 states, you don't have to see proof. If somebody says I have this capacity and they don't happen to have it, I always ask as my best practice. I say, well, do you happen to have it? And if they say, well, no, I didn't bring it, that's fine. Would you please tell me out loud that you have this capacity? And I'll just note that in my journal, in my additional information, that they told me they were the attorney in fact. And then that's all I don't have to do. That's even a best practice. That's not even required by law. I'm just suggesting that you document in your journal that you asked. But we're not required, and neither are any of the other states that do not have it in their law about proof of capacity. Okay.
Laura,
Hi,
one quick
Laura,
question.
All right, hold on. We'll do one at a time.
Hi, this is Jason, Laura. I have two-part question.
Okay.
The signature name affidavit usually is what has the also known as different names. So, for instance, you said that your maiden name, let's say, shows up because somewhere it was recorded somewhere down the road, so it has to show up on the credit. Now, you've mentioned that they should have an ID for each name they have, or did I misunderstand that?
Oh, what I was saying is, if they wanted to have, that's a document you're talking about. And when they sign that document, they're going to sign a bunch of different ways based on how their name showed up in credit. But one of the ways they sign, usually at the top or at the bottom, is the name they've been using all the time. And that's the name that we're going to put in the certificate to notarize. That's the only name.
Right. And that's usually what I do. Okay.
Okay.
And then the second part question. We usually get instructions and it says not specifically, it says make sure the signer signs as their name is printed. So when we're going through the process, I want to make sure I'm not crossing the boundaries of unpracticed law, is that I'll say, as you see a name, that's how you need to sign it. Because a lot of people don't sign, I've come across a lot of people don't sign that middle initial, and that middle initial pops up on there. So they're not used to signing like that. But if they sign without it, and if I don't tell them they have to sign it as they see printed, but if I tell them to sign it as printed, am I crossing the boundary?
Okay, so it's all a matter of how you say it. So I see the directions say you need to sign your name the way it's printed. I see here it's printed as Laura J. Biewer. That's their expectation. So do you see how I'm not saying I said you have to sign it that way?
Correct.
I'm referring to the document instructions or my contracting company's instructions, and then I just share with them what they said is the expectation. And then you're not crossing the line.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate the answer.
You're welcome, Jason. All right, so there's a question about the 13 states that actually it's covered in the law about representative capacity. Let's see. I got to look at my research here. Include what proof is needed or. Okay. So one, I want to clarify that those 13 states I named, it has to do with the rule has to do with in-state recording, not necessarily for out of state. So if you're dealing with out of state and those documents are going somewhere else, they may have their own issues about that. So remember, we deal with out of state all the time, but typically it's out of state lender, not out of state property. So that property is going to be recorded where we are. So for instance, in Arizona, there's actually specific step-by-step instructions in the governor's reference manual on how to fill that out, how to do that, and what you need to ask for. So those states I named them because in the law it tells them, like Hawaii, they must see the original or certified copy of a power of attorney. A plain old photocopy is not even enough. So every state has a different level. Some of the states say, like Colorado, says you should look at it. Well, should is not the same as must, right? So you should see it. So if I see I should see it, do you think I'm going to be asking? Absolutely, I'm going to ask for it. And then I'm going to have to decide on what their answer is if I feel comfortable with that. Indiana is a must see it. And I think the rest of them is a should see it. They want you. And if you do not see it, then they're asking you to ask them to tell you they have it. Okay, so there were only a couple that were must to see the actual document. Okay, so I think, let me go back to my notes. I wanted to talk about the signature line and seeing the proof and what to do when you don't see the proof, which is ask and document it. That's really what I wanted to cover there. Guy? Okay, so there we go. Okay. So the other thing, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. And again, thank you for asking the questions. If I can see them, then I'll respond to them as I'm talking. Otherwise, Carol, if you'd monitor that and see if I'm missing any questions in the chat so that they get their questions answered, that would be great. The other one was witnessing. And there seems to be a lot of confusion about who the witness is supposed to be, or if a witness is supposed to be, or when the witness is supposed to be. And sometimes the word witness on there doesn't mean there's a witness. It's part of the notarial wording itself. So when it comes to witnesses, and let me go to my cheat sheet for that, witnesses. So only a certain states require witnessing, and I'm really talking about real estate documents. Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, and South Carolina. Georgia is one witness who can never be the notary. And then the other ones are two witnesses, one which may be the notary, that's for their state. But if I'm in California and I'm notarizing a document that is in Florida, which I just did this last week, Florida is saying, yeah, you can be the notary. But does that automatically mean I can be the notary? I have to look to California rules to see what California says about me being both the notary and the witness. In California, it does not. The law is silent. It doesn't say. So that means I get to say, yes, okay, I'll be the second witness, or no, I'm not comfortable with being that second witness. I want you to have two witnesses signer, and it's the signer's job to provide those witnesses. So you can, it's your discretion if in your state covers witnessing within the law. And there's actually very few that do. And so if you're handling a loan signing and you see that you're going to be dealing with a state that requires witnesses, make sure that you talk to your signers ahead of time so that they get those arranged for you. Know that you have discretion on whether or not to be that second signer. You don't have to be. That is up to you. Of course, my thought is the more, the better, right? The more people who see this person sign, the better. It's just not all falling on me and maybe one other person. The other thing about witnessing is that the witnesses have to be first. The notary can be second or simultaneous. So that means it's not okay to say, we'll get the witnesses later and they'll sign after you leave. Now that's not going to happen with a loan signing because you have the documents and you're taking the documents. But there are many people on this call today who do general notary work as well. And what I get over and over again on power of attorney documents that for financial that has the witness requirement, and they'll say, oh, I'm just going to go meet my witnesses later. They couldn't come here today. That's not acceptable. You could meet with your witnesses first. You don't need me. And then come see me and I'll take your acknowledgement after. That's okay. Or have the witnesses with you. That's okay. But it's never okay to be after the fact. Witnesses need to witness the signature. That's the whole idea. And I have notaries, for those of you who are thinking, duh, I have notaries who call me asking if it's okay that the witnesses do that later. It's not okay. The other thing that seems to confuse notaries about witnesses, of course, I already addressed, which is, can I be one? Can I be the notary and one? The answer is, for most states, the answer is, yes, you can, but it's not the best practice. We don't recommend that you are, unless you're one of the few states that absolutely says, no, you cannot be. The third issue is sometimes they'll see the word witness in reference to this above the signature line for the notary, and they'll say, these are notaries who maybe are using their commission in the bank besides, doing it on the side. And it'll say, I'm not allowed to witness in the bank. We're not allowed to be witnesses for documents. And I have to tell them, you're not witnessing in the role of a witness. You're the role of a notary, and that word just happens to be part of the language that comes before your signature. It's really a notarial act. So there's some confusion there. And then there's two other pieces that are confusing. One is there is a difference between being a witness and fulfilling a notarial act called witnessing, signature witnessing. So there are states that, let me see if I can find them here, that have a notarial act. California is not one of them, but all around me there are, that allow a notary to witness the signature rather than take their acknowledgement. So I'm going to give you some examples of wording you might see to give you a clue that this is not an acknowledgement. The first clue is it's missing the word acknowledgement. If you cannot find the word acknowledgement in there, then it's a signature witnessing. It is not an acknowledgement. So wording might be signed before me on this date by so-and-so. It might be signed or attested before me on this date by so-and-so. It could be signed or attested before me on this date by so-and-so who proved to me on the basis of satisfactory evidence who was the person who signed before me. That was Georgia. Let me see if there's something different. A lot of times those are the words, Illinois, signed or attested before me on this date by the name of the person. So it could include ID in the certificate, or it might not. But here's the big difference. In this certificate, you cannot just exchange it for an acknowledgement when you're in a state that doesn't have witnessing, because they're very different. In the acknowledgement, there's no requirement for the notary to watch them sign. That's not the language. The language says you took their acknowledgement. And if they're in a state that requires witnessing of the signature, then the acknowledgement will not do it. Now, I learned from experience. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. I notarized for a Georgia property, and I do not have signature witnessing, so I replaced it with an acknowledgement, thinking that's pretty close. It should work just fine. It was rejected because even though I watched her sign, I was there and I watched it happen, my language in my certificate did not say I watched her. It says I took her acknowledgement. So they rejected it, and I ended up having to sign an affidavit to go with my certificate that said I witnessed the signing. And that's really when I started learning there's a significant difference between signature witnessing, where I must watch, and an acknowledgement where I don't have to watch. And if the state where it's going or the agency who's getting it expects you to watch, then you need that. So what do I do when I don't have that act? It's not my job to know what is the right replacement. It is my job to ask the signer, I don't have this notarial act. Here's what I can do for you. I can take your acknowledgement, or I can make you swear it's true. Now, when I do that one, I do have to watch you. So if it's important that I watch you, they may want that notarial act, even though they didn't ask for an oath. Would you please contact your agency and find out what is appropriate for them? What do they need? Because it's the unauthorized practice of law for me to make that determination. So please do not just replace a signature witnessing with an acknowledgement. They are two different acts with two different needs. Any questions about that?
Laura, hi, it's Carol. There's a few questions here, and I got to say something, Laura. I think I'm pretty good at what I do. I love what I do. I'm so glad you're one of my besties. You're so smart. Okay, but we have a couple of questions here.
Okay.
Dita, I'll get back to yours in a minute because I want to continue what she's talking about. Let's see. Lori asks both you and I, can you please clarify using credible witness, and is there a credible witness affidavit that I need? Do I have to notarize for the credible witnesses?
So that's a great question.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead, or
Sure. So I can tell you that in most states, the answer is you don't have another certificate. Their information goes in the journal. However, Florida does. Florida does have a separate certificate for their credible witnesses. And so you can look up that particular certificate, and you actually are notarizing for them in that certificate. I believe it's because of the oath. That's the notarial act. So I know for sure in that state there may be other states. So who asked this question? Is it Lori?
Lori,
What state, Lori, are you in? That's what I need to know. Because every state is different. If you're in California, the answer is no. You are performing an oath, which is the notarial act. You will record the credible witness in the ID column and then the additional information column if you have two of them. And you can just write down that you gave them the oath. You can also do a separate line entry if you want for each one, whichever. I go through a journal so fast, I don't like using extra lines unless I have to. But there's no extra certificate or document that shows that I performed that notarial act.
I'll tell you what I do, Laura, because all my students are all over the country.
Right.
I can't keep up with the laws, no way. So when they do have this situation, a lot of times I try to get them to find out whether or not the affidavit is required.
Right.
I always provide an affidavit to them. And you know what, just to keep it for their own use, whether it's ever required by anybody or not, if it makes them feel comfortable. I tell them, go ahead and, do it and keep it in your journal or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to hurt anything, Carol, for them to do one and keep it in their journal. It just becomes part of their records.
That's kind of what I thought. It doesn't hurt anything, and it could help them someday. You never know.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. We have a couple of other questions here. Let me get back to them. I don't want to lose her question, so I want to address this very quickly from Dina. Can a punched driver's license issued within the past 5 years be a valid form of identification?
So fabulous question, because every state is different. I'll tell you what I know about California specifically and why, and then you could apply that information to your state. In California, the DMV, when they punch a hole, it invalidates that card. So it doesn't matter what the dates are, it's done. I cannot do anything with it. So that's because when we go to the DMV code, because sometimes you have to look at other law besides our own. Within the DMV code, it indicates it invalidates the card. Now, there are some states that either A, don't use the word current or valid in their language for their card. So in that case, it would be just fine to use it because it doesn't matter. Or they would have to look at their DMV code for their state to see if the hole punch invalidates the card or not. That's the language you need to look for.
Okay, let's see here. This is from LP to everyone. Can the spouse of a grantee on a power of attorney act as a witness?
So I think the question is, there's a power of attorney document, and are they trying to be a witness to have the power of attorney notarized, or is the power of attorney in use? And now they want the spouse to be a witness on a document and they're signing in capacity. That's what I'm not sure about that question. Can I get clarification?
LP, can you come on and tell us what you're talking about? I guess.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh,
there, LP, yes.
Yes, I have a question. Okay, so tomorrow I have a power of attorney document coming up, and I live in Florida, and it does require 2 witnesses. And it's the daughter who contacted me for her mother. So she asked if her husband could act as one of the witnesses. The daughter's husband could act as one of the witnesses. And my first inclination was to say no, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so the rule with witnesses is that they're impartial. So my questions then would be,
yes,
is this would be the son-in-law, right? Does he
Correct.
have any benefit? Is he named in any way? Is there any way that he could benefit from this transaction? And if the answer is yes, then no, he should not be that witness.
Okay.
Well, if the power of attorney is going to
perfect.
the daughter and he's her husband, I would say.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Not.
All right. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
From Michelle Gurin to everyone. Back to witness signing, a power of attorney before the notarization. How does the notary know that they actually witnessed the signature and just didn't sign the paper when they weren't even there?
So let me rephrase it to see if I understand correctly. How does the notary know that the witnesses actually witnessed the signature before it came to me? Meaning they just got 2 people to sign the document and those people did not actually witness it. What happens in the document before it comes to me is not my job. So I don't have a way to prove whether those 2 people who signed it actually watched him sign or not. That's all on the signer. That's not on me. So I can ask him, did these people watch you sign the document? And if he says, yes, that's what happened, I could write that in my additional information in my journal to indicate he said they watched him sign, and that's the end of my responsibility. My responsibility starts and stops with what happens in front of me. Does that answer it? I know we want to be really good at what we do, and we want to protect the signer and the integrity of the document. However, we cannot take responsibility for things that happened before it got to us or what they do with it after they've left us. We can only be responsible for doing the right thing when they're with us.
Laura, this is
Yes.
Guy.
Hi, Guy.
So I've been thinking about this situation since it came up earlier in our call. Oftentimes in the notarial block, it'll indicate that we saw the person sign the document. So if they've taken this to 2 of their friends and the friends watch them sign the document, it's already signed when it comes to us.
That's right.
So do we have them sign it a second time?
So it depends, Guy. What kind of notarial act? If you are taking care of a witnessing act, the answer is they have to sign it again, meaning that's not going to work. The signer and the witnesses really need to all be together with the notary. If the notarial act is a witnessing act, if it's an acknowledgement act, you do not have to watch them sign. It does not say that you saw them sign. What it says is that you took their acknowledgement that they signed. Big difference.
All right, so on a deed of
That's
trust,
usually what I see as an acknowledgement.
on a deed of trust, it's typically an acknowledgement.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Now, on a deed of trust, remember, you're probably going to have everybody there because they don't have the documents ahead of time.
True.
So in that case, you're probably almost always going to have them with you at the time.
All right.
And remember, we're not notarizing the witness's signature, only the signer.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's a question from Matt Miller. Can notaries provide legal documents?
Notaries are ministerial officers, unless you're in Louisiana, then you live on a different planet. So the rest of us, we are not allowed to provide documents or prepare their documents unless it's within the scope of being an employee. So if it's your job where you work to hand out company documents, then of course that's your job. Go ahead and do it. Or if it's your job to prepare the documents, or you have a certification to do so. So you're a document specialist and you've had training to do that, or you're a paralegal and you have training to do that, then of course you could prepare them. But if you don't have the training, you're just doing this as a notary and you're it, then the answer is no. Don't provide the document, don't prepare their document.
I find that a lot. I have people who do the general notary work and they'll call and say, I know exactly what they need. They don't know what they need, but I know what they need. Can I just give it to them? Can't do it. They have to figure it out for themselves, exactly what document they need to have.
Now, certainly, I can name documents as examples, or in theory, I can tell them, why don't you go Google such and such, and I can help them start their search, or I can direct them to somebody who can help them, another professional. So I can still help them, even though I can't hand them a document. Mm-hmm. I can help them find the document, help them find the assistance, and then bring it back to me and I can notarize it. And sometimes the help I provide them, they are able to get it notarized within that because the paralegal happens to be a notary as well, or the attorney happens to have a notary as well. So that's okay. Remember, what I'm about is how do I help my signer? And it may not be by me giving them a document. It may be by me hooking them up or connecting them with the appropriate help.
That's good. Okay, from Victoria to everyone, I have a question. I don't know how to ask, but I got a call for an attorney in fact request, but the client didn't have a recorded power of attorney. My question is, are we not allowed to provide a durable power of attorney fillable form? And what role as a notary do we have in a power of attorney? This may have been already answered.
I think that's what we just talked about.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
We're not allowed to give it. There are many different powers of attorney documents out there. Some are durable, non-durable, limited, special, lots of different ways it needs to be prepared. And that's not our training. That's not our background. We shouldn't recommend a particular kind.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, Matt Miller, what about the affidavit Carol was talking about?
So that's not a document. That's actually a notary certificate that she's created that's saying that these people acted as human IDs and they swore to certain things were true about that situation. And she's keeping that, or having the notary keep it for their own purposes. It's not a document that's going out into the world.
Yeah. Okay, just in case they ever have to refer to it if there's a problem, they have proof. Okay, let's see. From Galaxy S9, I like asking the questions. I like having you answer them. I was presented with a month-and-a-half-old paper copy of a driver's, must mean license, by the husband and wife license had expired the day before signing, which is okay in my state, but it had her maiden name and they've been married 3.5 years. I was derided by the hiring company for refusing to complete the signing. What should I have done? Okay, so.
Well, if the problem with the card, well, there's two things I would look at. One is the state that you're calling from, because that makes all the difference in the world as to what your options are. So what I can speak to is that in many states, I see two things. One is the term satisfactory evidence of identity, and then they might or might not give you a list of cards. But what they're looking for is reasonable reliance upon something that helps you confirm the person standing in front of you is the same person named in the document. Now, some states give a whole wide, they just say, hey, if it looks like that person, it's good. They don't say name match. And I find that interesting. What they're saying is, look, you've got a picture, you've got a physical description, you've got plenty of information there. If the name doesn't exactly match, you have some discretion. And what might that discretion be? Well, that discretion could be, what else is in your wallet? If you're saying that name belongs to you, what else do you have? Now, if they can give you supplementary information that supports that name and you're confident this is that person, then I think you've met satisfactory evidence of identity. If they haven't, then I'd look at credible witnesses. And most states, not all, but most states allow for 1 or 2 credible witnesses. And I would have gone the credible witnesses route if your state allowed for that, to support that they had the maiden name, if that's the name they had to sign in. They had to sign in the married name and the ID was in the maiden name. Credible witnesses is a good way to resolve that. If credible witnesses is not allowed in your state, does your state say satisfactory evidence of identity? And I'd look to see what your law says about that. And if it does not state name match, that means you have room for name variation if other factors indicate it's the same person.
Laura, we have a question from Victoria Watts. She would like permission to unmute her mic and ask if there's time, and I think we have time.
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
Right. Hi, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh, good. Oh my God, this is a wonderful call. Definitely got to listen to this one again and again. I came in a little late. Coincidentally, I had a power attorney, general notary work yesterday. I had to go to a detention center, and I was met there by the inmate's mother, girlfriend's mother. Anyway, she pulled off some form off of the computer, and you know, as a notary, I'm constantly telling myself, it is not my job. It is not my job to interpret all of this. But because we had a cage between us, I was reading it to him. Later on, I found out that there was a little hole on the side that I could have slipped it through. I did not know that. I know that now. But I was reading it to him, and I found myself thinking, durable power attorney, this is for life. This is for a lifetime. And I was tempted to, I kept saying it again and again. I was tempted to have them say, do you want this for a lifetime, or do you want this only while you're incarcerated? But I didn't say it. That was correct, right? Because that would have been giving advice.
Yeah. Right. The document is not our business.
Yeah.
Really. And you know, powers of attorney, even though that power of attorney could have been set up as durable, meaning it's going to go on forever, even if they can't say so, power of attorneys can be revoked.
Right. I read
like
that.
They can be started.
Yeah, I read that too, that it can be revoked.
Sure.
But you know, you think sometimes people get busy in their life and they forgot that it was in place.
Right. Not my job.
Okay. He was old enough to be my kid. So I'm thinking about him that way. It's like, you sure you want to do this? Anyway, thank you. This is an awesome topic.
Great. Thanks, Victoria.
I think we all have scars after years of being a notary from biting our tongue.
Yeah.
Mouth shut.
Anything else? Did we get to
one more, brother Mike is still on mute. So in California, where I am, we don't need to see proof of power of attorney if someone wants us to notarize something and they're notarizing it as an attorney, in fact.
That's right. In California, we're one of the states that we do not have to see the proof. I highly recommend you ask.
Yes, that's scary. People lose property behind that.
Right.
Okay.
Terry, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment. I know we can't, in response to Victoria's question, we can't tell them they shouldn't sign or whatever, but I do believe it is our responsibility to ask them to read the document and to acknowledge to us that they understand the document and they are willingly signing.
So,
and from the person, she was mentioning this young man who she didn't think he should probably sign, but she couldn't say anything. She bit her tongue. And I've had that situation. And I will always say to them, please read this document when they're being given something like a power of attorney, and just read it. And do you understand what you're signing? Do you acknowledge to me that you understand what you're signing and you are willingly signing this? To me, that meets the criteria of my role is protecting both the signer and the other party as well. That I have to be impartial, but I need to make sure that the signer isn't signing something under duress or without proper knowledge of what they're signing. And I have actually had people read it through and say to me, I don't think I understand this, or I don't think I want to do this. And that's fine. If you're not comfortable signing this, then as a notary, I'm not comfortable notarizing it, because I need to protect both you and the other side of this. I'm impartial. I'm not pushing you to do one thing or the other. So that's how I guess I would have handled it with that young man and said, please review this document that you're about to sign. Do you agree with this? I need to hear you say, yes, you agree with it. Or no, you don't. And if you don't, then the point, I'm leaving. Your thoughts?
I think that it is important when we introduce notarization, particularly more in the general notary world, than when we're coming in to do a loan signing, because you know what, they've been going through months before they got to us. We're at the end of the line. But in general notary work, and especially when I do power of attorney work, I do elderly work, jail work, and hospital work, I always introduce, I'm here to notarize a document that you're going to be signing. And here's the name of that document. And this kind of document says, you're giving permission to this person that you named to do whatever I see. I see that this is a financial one, so they can do any of these things on your behalf. Is that the kind of document you wanted me to notarize for you today? So, and that's as far as I go. I don't necessarily ask them to read it. I just want to know, are they prepared to be signing that kind of document? But I think, Terry, what I'm saying is very similar to what you're saying. All right. Oh, Carol muted herself, so I guess it's me.
I'm sorry, my phone was ringing.
That's okay. Matt asked a question about, couldn't I use a jurat? I'm not sure, Matt, if you were referring back to your original question about the affidavit that Carol talked about. Would you please clarify that, Matt? I don't know if you're still on the call. Okay, so yes, a California jurat has a place for a statement. Remember, a jurat means that I'm certifying their signature and I'm giving them their oath, and they're swearing to certain statements that are written. So a jurat has to go with a statement of some kind. It can't be by itself. So I don't know if that's what you were looking at, but if it was with a statement, then yes, you could use a jurat for the same purpose, but it needs to have a statement. Typically, all that's required with a credible witness is an oath. And remember, an oath is different than a jurat. All right, Carol,
we're getting there to 9 o'clock.
Yeah, so I think we want to be wrapping up. And I think one of the things I want to ask the callers today is, do you find it of value to talk about some of the notarial basics, that performing the notarial acts themselves, besides talking about the loan signing process itself and marketing your business? I personally think it's important that the notary and notary signing agent is there, and that we need to be good at what we do, and that we know our own state laws. And if we don't know them, then get help on how to find out what those are. Don't just take the answers from somebody else in another state, or even in your own state. make sure that there's proof of what's being said. I don't give answers here unless I've already researched it and I can quote where it came from. And that's what I think is important for all of us as notaries, is to make sure that it's not our job to know if those loan documents are right, but it is my job to know what I do is right. So I'm hoping this is helpful for you. And when you give feedback to Bill, let us know if you want any more of this, or even just a little portion of every call on this, or if you prefer to, keep going with the other things we're doing. Not that we would stop that.
Laura, I think it's a resounding yes. Everybody's really enjoyed this one. I think
Great.
your expertise and the way that you research everything is just so invaluable. It really is to myself as well. You know, we go through life doing what we do every day, and we don't get a lot of attention paid to those details that are so important.
Right.
And you really did a great job. I appreciate what you did today. I know everybody else does.
Thank you. If you
May
have,
I ask
you have a
one
state-specific
final
question, hold on. If you have a state-specific question and I didn't answer it, reach out to me directly at my email, biewer@spcglobal.net, and I'm happy to answer your state-specific question. Okay, who did I interrupt?
Apparently changed
It's
his mind.
Jason.
Yeah, Jason.
No, it's Jason. I have a question about the power of attorneys as for general notary work. And a lot of times, most people that look for us, I would say about 90% of the time are self-proven, durable power of attorneys. They buy off the internet or they buy an Office Depot. And what happens a lot of times, it's not a completed document. But what I do, I don't tell them how to sign it, but I tell them that I need a completed document in order for us to continue, to have the process. So in other words, so they can hit that the lines that need to be initialed, something has to be, so there should be no blank. So I tell them I need a completed document in order for us to have the notarization process complete. Is that okay to tell them?
Sure, it is a requirement in all 50 states. Finally, something that's the same. All 50 states require complete documents. Okay, so absolutely, that's part of my job, and you can tell them anything that's part of your job.
Right, because we're not concerned, and unfortunately, all these Facebook forums out there are just all over the place, and it doesn't matter what says in the document. If someone wants to leave all their property to their cats, it doesn't matter to us as long as they are doing this willingly and everything is filled out, and we just do the notarial act and we're done. And that's the message I believe that's got to get across to the notary world, is that we're not concerned with what they're doing with their assets and all that stuff. That makes sense?
Yes, Jason. It is important. The type of protection we're offering is to make sure that somebody else isn't signing that document. That's where our protection is. Not about stopping them from doing something we think we don't agree with. So I think, Carol, that we are closing up on the hour and it's time to wrap up this call.
Except for one thing. I want to remind everyone that on Sunday, is it Sunday the 7th?
Yes.
Laura is going to be holding her training on wills and trusts and so forth. And it's a must. Everybody needs to watch this. This is great.
Thank you, Carol. So that is from 5 to 7. No, when is that? 3 to 5 on Sunday. And I will be talking about living trusts. And I will be going through actual living trust documents that I have that are sample documents and helping people understand what's involved from the notary's perspective in a trust and what it takes to perform one and how do I find that business. So if that's something that you're interested in, let Bill or I know and we can get you the link to get it to that.
Is that doing these kinds of things to increase your business and add to your business is going to keep you going for years. You need to do this. Sorry, Judy. I'm sorry. I'm out of here. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks to everybody for participating on the call today. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.